Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make this multi-knot double row wire work macrame bracelet, and this is what it looks like. So this is what mine looks like with the materials that I've used. So you have two rows here going down with beads and then multiple knots in between to give quite a nice separated effect there. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to be using. Now first off here, the wire that I've got is a 0.6mm and it's just a regular round wire, and I'm using a silver coated copper wire as well. The beads that I'm using here, these are multicolored agate and they're 6mm rounds, so just faceted, these ones give a nice sparkle, but you can always use whatever beads you want to. And then finally I just have my findings because I'm going to finish off my bracelet with some jump rings, extended chain and a clasp. So let's get it together and let's get started. So the first length of wire we'll need are the holding wires here, and we just need these to be long enough to go around the wrist and a bit extra. So I've made both of mine two here, about 45 centimeters long. And then as for the working lengths of wire, we'll need three lengths here of about 1 meter each. What I'm then going to be working on is my mini macrame board here, because it has these notches all the way around. It makes it much easier to work with. So we need to just take our holding wires, I'm just going to take one at a time and just attach these to the board. So I'm just going to leave a bit of a tail on the other side there, and then put each of these wires in each their own slot right next to each other, so like this. And then what we need to do is take all the working wires as well, so again get towards the end of all of them, and then I want to attach two of them in the same slot as one of the holding wires. And again, just leave a bit of a tail because we just want to use them again at the end as well. And the other one, the single one, just put that in the same slot as the other one. And on the back, I'm just kind of folding them down like this so they'll stay in place. So that's what it looks like now. So we can just separate all the wires out here. So I'll take my single working wire to the one side and then the two others to that side. And then what we need to do as well, you can then start adding the beads on now. You might as well. So I'm going to add some beads onto each of the lengths of my holding wires. So I'm then just going to push up my beads that I've added here so you can see them. And it looks like that. So you can just add however many beads you want to. It doesn't matter if you've added too many or too few, because you can always release your holding wires and either add some more if you need to or take some off. So now what we need to do is start with our macrame. So what we'll be using is a square knot to make this bracelet. So if you're not too familiar with basic macrame knots, I do have a tutorial that talks about that and explains and teaches you some of them, so you can have a look at that if you need to. But otherwise what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with the one where I have both of my working cords in the same slot, just starting on that one side. It doesn't matter what side you start on. And then I'm going to start with my left one of the two. Again, it doesn't matter what side you start from as long as you stay consistent. It's just what comes natural to me. So I'll bring this over, and also we only focus on one of our holding wires at a time. So because it's these two working wires I'm using, I'm going to be using this holding wire. So to make a square knot, I'll take my left one over the holding wire there, the right one goes over that, and then underneath everything in the middle there, and then up. And remember to come up between the two holding wires. So we're just focusing on that one holding wire, and then pull it through. Now as you can see, even though we're doing macrame, because we're working with wire, it's quite a bit different than working with cord. So you have to just handle the wire a little bit differently. So be a little bit more gentle, and make sure when you're moving your wire around you don't get any obvious bends or kinks in the wire, because that can then weaken and damage it and maybe end up making it snap. So if you get halfway all the way through and then your wire snaps, that won't be too fun. So just try and keep it as smooth as possible, smooth it out as you go with your hands and fingers. I usually, when I tighten my knots, then go like that as well, just to smooth out any bends or anything. So obviously the first one here is a bit loose, but it's because it's open space. We're going to then finish off this knot by doing the other half. So take the wire from the opposite side, so start with your opposite side, my right one in this case. Take then my left one over that, underneath everything in the middle, and then up through that loop, remembering only to focus on that holding wire. And then we want to pull that up and tighten that completely. So there we go, that's now our first square knot. So obviously, because this is wire that we're working with, you can pull it pretty tight. But again, just be careful, if you have any kinks or anything, you can end up snapping the wire. So just work your way through and do it gently. So I'm going to make another square knot right underneath this. So I take again the same one that I started with before. My left one goes over, then my right one goes over that, underneath everything in the middle, and up through the loop, remembering to come in between the two holding wires. Tighten that all the way up, and make sure when you're doing wire macrame as well, try and make sure you have an even tension as you're tightening your knots, and just make sure you get a much neater finish to the whole piece. So do the opposite side here so we can make the other half of the square knot. Same way as before, tighten that all the way up, and then once you've done that, we now have two square knots straight underneath each other. And then it's at this point you want to then bring in your bead as well. So your very first bead, you need to bring the bead up on the opposite holding wire that you've just been working with, because basically we just need to make sure that we're going with the right sizing. So the amount of knots here will be determined on how large your bead is, because you can use different materials. So if you're using larger beads, you might need to use to make an extra square knot there to fill in that same space, so when you lie them next to each other. But this fits quite perfectly. So I've done that side, the bead on that opposite side fits in the size wise, so we now need to move over to the other side here and then start making our square knots on that side. So that means the working wire, that's coming out to the side that we were just working with, so way out to the side, we're going to leave that to the side for now and not work with that. So we're going to work with the working wire that's in the middle, basically pointing towards the opposite side. We're going to move over to now, and then the working wire that we haven't used yet. And we then again just start making our square knots. Again, I take my left side over because that's what comes natural to me, and that's what I do consistently throughout. And then take this working wire that's coming in towards the middle, take that over the previous one, remembering to come down between the two holding wires to avoid that one we've just done, so just focus on the other one now. Pull that all the way through, and then as we tighten this, it's going to tighten all the way up like that. And don't worry too much about the beads slipping up and down for now, because it is the top one, it's going to be loose on the other side there. Just make sure to get your knots in place. So tighten it nicely, something like that. Then we need to do the other side of the square knot there. Then once you've done this part, it kind of falls much more into place and gets more easy to work with, because we've then used both sides and it's kind of fastened in place better. So I like to just keep my finger on this to make sure when I tighten this it's going to sit correctly, because it might kind of want to separate out a little bit. So there we go, that's the first one. It's already much easier to work with now. So I'm going to make another square knot, because I know from up here it's going to be about 2 square knots per bead, with this size beads anyway. Just do whatever the amount of square knots that will fit whatever beads that you're using. And you can also use other shapes of beads, rondelles would be nice as well. Tighten that. Do the other half of the square knot. So this is just really the basic technique, and you can really experiment using different materials and playing with different shapes of beads as well. Be kind of interesting to see. So like that. So now we've done our square knots underneath that bead. So again, we then need to take up the next bead from the opposite side. So always bring up the bead on the opposite holding wire that we just did the knots on. Push that up all the way there, and then that'll sit just like that, filling in that gap that's going to be in between our knots on this side. And then we just want to continue again, the working wire going way out to the side of the one we just used. Keep that out to the side and keep it out of the way. And now we want to use the one in the middle here and the one to the other side. So the one in the middle, in my case the left one, goes over the holding wire, So now we're focusing on the holding wire of the bead that we just brought up. Remember that. Bring the other one over that, underneath the middle and up through the loop. Remembering to only focus on this holding wire. So avoid bringing the other one into it. And then just tighten that. Now, like I said, because this is wire, it works a little bit differently than cord. So you just have to find your rhythm, how to work with it. Because you can't pull it just like cord and then have it kind of sit how you want it to. You have to make sure that you're having it sit correctly as you're pulling it. And do the half of the square knot. So as you can see, all we're doing is using the square knot here to create this bracelet. Just adding in our beads along the way. Pulling that one tight. And then we've made one full square knot there, and you can then see that bead we pushed up is sitting there nice and securely now and kind of fastened in place by all these knots. So you just want to continue like this, make one more in my case, so 2 for each bead that we put up, then keep doing this until you reach almost the length of your bracelet. I've now reached the end here where I've added my last bead and made my last knot, and then it looks like this, go all the way up. So you have these 2 rows with knots and beads in between. And what I've ended up with is 12 beads on each side here, but obviously that'll depend on how long you need your bracelet to be and also what materials you're using. So the last bead down here is a bit loose. As you can see, we've not made knots on the other side to cage that in yet, and it's the same on the other end. So to cage that in, secure that in place and also finish off the ends, what we need to do is finish off one end at a time here. I'm going to show you how to do this end, and then you just flip it around and do the same on the other end as well. So we have the 2 holding wires are the ones there that are holding all the beads. They're just still going to stay on the board. And then what we need to do, we have these 3 working wires where one of them here is in the middle. So that's the one that's always crossed from side to side. That one we then also need to bring down, just straight down along with the holding wires there. And you can just place that in to one of the slots as well. So that's going to then now end up also turning into one of the holding wires there. So we now have these 2 working wires left. All we're going to do is continue making square knots, but we're going to be doing it around all these 3 holding wires to basically be able to finish off the end. So just make a square knot, again starting from the same side that I've done the whole time, just what comes natural to me. And then when you tighten this, you're just going to have it come all the way up here underneath. And now this first 1 or 2 knots aren't going to be as tight or as small as the other ones you've made here, because we have a wider space with these holding wires. But we'll just get the first one in place. So make the other side of your square knot. Remember to grab all the holding wires there in the middle. Tighten this, the second half of it, just all the way up. And just make it as tight as seems comfortable for now, because then we'll make another one and then we'll be able to pull that even tighter. So it kind of is going to graduate inwards a little bit. Make a second square knot. So you can see we're starting with that graduation, and then the other half of the square knot. And this one is going to kind of be the size, as tight as it can be with these knots. Pull that tight, just like that. So there we now have a nice finish on it where it kind of graduates inwards, but it also just blends in because we kept making the same knots. Now that we then made those 2 square knots around all 3 base wires here, what I want to just do is get rid of one of my base wires, because we have quite a few wires and we also need to think about that we're going to finish off the ends of the bracelet. So what I'm going to do is make sure to grab the one that was the middle working cord. So that's this one in my case. You can just compare the lengths, so just make sure you grab that one because that's intertwined with all the knots as well, so it's not going to come undone. So I'll grab that and kind of separate it out, and then I'm going to get my flush cutters or wire cutters, go right up to as far close as I can get and cut that off. And then you can just use a pair of pliers if you need to, just to push that back down, the end of it. And then I'm just going to make another square knot with the same 2 working wires. And then we only have 2 holding wires left. So that's already got rid of one there. Tighten that nicely. Make the other half to complete your square knot. And then we're going to have less wires to work with to be able to finish off, which is going to really help with that. So this is what it looks like now. So now what we need to do is repeat this on the other end. So you can just turn your board around, your bracelet, whatever it's attached to. We want to just free up some space here, and you want to do the exact same thing here. Now that I've then done both ends here, I've taken it off the board as well, because the beads are secure, they're not going to fall off. Then what we need to do is get rid of the excess wire here that we don't need to use anymore, and just finish off the end to be ready to turn it into a full wearable bracelet. So what I'm going to do is just start with these working wires that I was making the macrame knots with. Now I'm going to wrap them around these holding wires. What I'm just going to do is check what direction they're kind of going in. So if you look at your very last knot, you'll see you'll have a little loop going over the working wire there, and it's the same on the other side, kind of on the back side there. So what I want to do is have them start wrapping around so they kind of go with that knot, so they're not going above that loop that's there. So just turn them in that direction, that way you get less bulk really on the end here. So I'm turning them around and then wrapping this wire around the 2 holding wires. About just once or twice is enough, so it secures nicely. And then I'm going to go in and cut off the excess close to the holding wires there. And then always just make sure you grab your chain nose pliers or flat nose, and you want to just squeeze in that end, because you'll always have, once you cut off your wire, a little piece of the very end sticking out. So you want to make sure you kind of squeeze that in, so it's not going to be sticking into any skin or catching on any clothes. And always run your finger over it, and if you can feel it still, just squeeze it in a bit more. So that's one. We do the same with the other one here. So I'll go to the other side, wrap that in the same direction, and again just go around the 2 holding wires until you feel it's secure. Just wrap around once or twice, cut off the excess, and then again the same principle, just squeeze down that very end to make it a nice, neat and professional finish, like that. So now we have 2 wires left, and these are the 2 holding wires. So with that, I'm also just gonna, I want to just end up with one to be able to make a loop to finish off. So what I want to do is, you can just have a look at your wires and see if one is longer. You can just leave the longest one to make it easiest to work with. Also, in case your wires are a bit short here. So just start, take one of them, kind of bend it away from the other one, from where it's coming out. And again, just start wrapping this one around the one wire we have left now, right down where you've done the other wraps. Again, just once or twice. When you've done that, cut off the excess and do your final squeeze there of these ones to make sure it's tugged in nicely. And then we have this one wire left that I'm going to use to make my final loop with, because I'm going to use a clasp, an extended chain. That's just what I'm choosing here. You can obviously finish it off in a different way if you want to, but that's what I like for this one. So I'm going to do a standard wrap loop on this. So I take my chain nose, go up, so I have a little bit of space of bare wire there below that turn I'm going to do, bend it. Then I'm going to just use my 6-step bell making pliers, because I'm going to use the same step here on both ends, so I know it becomes the exact same size. You can easily use round nose pliers, I just prefer to use these. Make your loop from all the way around, and then grab the loop with your flat nose or chain nose, and then wrap the remaining part of this tail around that little space that we left of the bare wire, just below the loop, till you fill it in and meet up with the other wraps that you did to finish off the other wires basically. So keep wrapping until that gap is filled in. Then once it is, cut this off as well, and then squeeze it in. Now that's just how I'm finishing off this one. What you could also do is say leave that very last wire that I just cut off and then make some kind of swirl here to cover up all this as well if you want to. Maybe also depends how neat you've managed to make it. You can always use something like that to help cover up. Squeeze them in, and then here we have a loop ready to then attach whatever clasp and findings you want to use, and I'm just going to use a jump ring to do that with. Once you then attach your clasp here, like I've done there, lobster claw clasp and extender chain, that's just what I'm using, then all that's left to do is just really bend this into shape. So you can either just shape this around something that has the size and shape you want your bracelet to be, or you can just gently do a bit at a time here, go over it, use your hands and your fingers to put some gentle curves in there. So I recommend kind of going from side to side, gently a bit at a time, and not go in one place and do a big bend because that will just put it out of shape. But just a bit at a time here, back and forth, and then you'll slowly see it'll get a nice bracelet shape. I prefer to kind of make it a bit oval. And then obviously it's wire, it's going to hold its shape, but because we used 0.6mm for this, it is a little bit more flexible. So that's why as well for this I prefer adding the clasp to it, so when you wear it, it is nice and secure. So it's not like a bangle you have to worry about maybe coming off because it's not strong enough. So that's why I chose to use a clasp. Then once you have the shape, then you just use that, and then your finished bracelet is here, and it looks like that. So it gives quite a nice effect there with the macrame with the wire, and obviously you can use a bunch of different kinds of beads and experiment with that as well. So that's how you make this bracelet. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this triple row wire macrame bracelet. And this is it. So this is how it looks, and I've just chosen these beads, some purple coated hematite, and then copper wire, but obviously you can choose whatever combination you want. So it looks like this, and you get this kind of cuff style bracelet because you have the rigidity from the wire, but it's still a basic macrame technique, just with wire instead of cord.